Hey there guys, it's Zologe here with the deck profile for the Worms. This is an archetype that revolves around flipping monsters and generating hand advantage while keeping control of the board using Worm King. This deck is really nice and it actually has some potential to become something really good in the next format. Well, in this format too, if things go its way, because the deck actually has some pretty good monsters. And yeah, let's go into it, shall we? So first we got the Worm King. This is, well, 3 of the Worm Kings. This is a card that allows us just to tribute another worm monster, including himself even, to pop a card our opponent controls. This is for back row removal as well as destroying monsters, which is really cool. He also sits on a 2700 attack, so he's really awesome in that regard. His summoning condition is pretty easy, and we can summon him using a Nebula Meteorite. That card is just so difficult to pronounce. But yeah. It's a pretty good card on its own. And then we have the Worm Queen. Now, Worm Queen is just an easy way to get to Worm King, because you can tribute a monster, a worm monster you control, to special summon a worm monster with a level equal to or less than a monster tributed. You can tribute Worm Queen herself to bring out the Worm King should you really need one at the point of summoning her. So she's basically a 4th Worm King in the deck. Next we run the 1 Worm Victory. This is our, not necessarily win condition, but it's a big late game beat stick that can just win you games. And when it's flipped face up, you get to destroy all face-up monsters on the field which aren't worms. So it basically lightning vortexes your opponent's entire board, which is really cool. And on top of that, he gains fire attack for each reptile type worm monster in your graveyard. So he becomes a huge late game beat stick should come to that. Next we got the triple Worm Zex. This card is pretty good because when he's normal summoned, you get to ditch a worm monster from your deck to your graveyard. So that normally means you ditch something like Yangan, which you can special summon from your graveyard if the only monster you control is Zex. And when you special summon it, it's special summon it in face down defense position. And when you flip it face up, regardless of how it's summoned, yeah, you get to bounce back a face-up monster opponent control. So it's kind of nice in that regard. But yeah, we haven't gone that far yet. Next we got for the Worm Carderos. This is our way to search out our level 4 or lower worms. When he's flipped face up, he can search himself too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, he's basically to get to our combo pieces, Iris X's, and things like that. So he's kind of awesome in that regard. Next we run the 1 Honest, because most of this deck is light. Sure, Honest is not as good as it usually is, considering the format, but it can mean game if you play it in the right place. So hence why I run it in this particular deck, because sometimes some of the monsters actually lack a little bit in attack power. So even like a what's his face, even Sir can run over most of the stuff, which is kind of sad. Hence why I run Honest, just to kind of stop things and maybe go for game if I need that, just that little extra of attack power. Next we run the triple Kage Tokage. This is a really good monster because it allows us to go into our rank 4 place with relative ease. If it's in our hand and we have another level 4 monster in hand, we can summon the Worm Zex and then special summon our Kage Tokage. Get the ditch from the Zex off and still go for a rank 4 play after that, which is really nice. Next, of course, we run the triple Worm Yangan. I already explained this card earlier, but it's pretty nice to have. It's a level 4 too, so it works together with Kage Tokage, so it's rarely dead even if you draw into it. Alternatively, you can use it for Worm 0, but yeah. Next we go for the 1 Worm Jet Eclipse. This guy is just tribute fodder and a way to keep your life points safe. It's not something really important, but it's pretty much a safe way to get to our Worm Kings with little to no effort. Next we run the 1 Worm Lynx. This guy is just a combo piece together with a Worm Nebula Meteorite. Just to get a bunch of draws off, and nothing really too spectacular when it comes to it, but it's a pretty decent card if it just gets to stay on the field. It's basically a Nat Pagel in case you are into Hearthstone. Next we run the 1 Global. This is just for our 1 Synchro of the deck, which is Armadis. I really like taking this card in level 4 based decks because of Armadis, because it's such a good card. Because your opponent cannot stop it when it attacks, which is really nice, and they cannot get any effects off of it when it destroys things either, so it's really nice. Next we run the 1 polymerization. It's for our worm 0, which is a pretty good plus generator, and it can lead to game if it gets to stay on the field long enough. Next we run the 1 Book of Moon. This is a really nice card because it has multiple functions. One, it can reset your worm so you can go off more plays from get more searches of Carderos, bounce back more stuff with Yagans, get Jet Eclipse effect off yet again, or just set the worm victory again. So it's kind of a good card there. Also, it can stop opponent's plays too, so yeah, it's kind of nice in that regard. Also, it's difficult to stop in this format. Like, the only card which I know of right at the top of my head that can actually stop this card is the Stellar Nova Alpha. And why Stellar Nova Alpha something like a Book of Moon when you can Stellar Nova something like this, which is more threatening? Next we run the triple supply squad. Since we set a lot of monsters and hope to our opponent that they smash into them, we kind of want to get some draw power, and the best way to like profit off of our monster's own destruction is with a supply unit, well, supply squad. With Carderos, you basically get a +2 off of that 1 card, which is really nice. Well, technically it's a +1, but you get where I'm coming from here. Next we go for the double worm call. This is a really interesting card because you can set the worm victory straight from your hand if your opponent controls a monster and you control nothing. So it's basically there for rebuttal plays as well as for some strong second turn plays. And for setup and all that good stuff. Next we run the double burst rebirth. This is just for resetting plays and getting more like, getting more cards to our hand and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of nice in this deck. Next we run the double Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. Spinning cards to top of the deck has always been a powerful thing, and Phoenix Wing Wind Blast is nothing that I love this card, I really do. It's better than Burning Abyss, sure, but this deck can still profit off of it to at least some extent, and it stops plays dead in their tracks too. Sure, it's a -1 or a 1-for-1 rather, but still, it's nice to go for. Next we go for the 2 breakthrough skills to stop opponent's plays dead in their tracks and negating monster effects which you don't really want to deal with during our turn, which is kind of nice. Next we run the triple Worm Nebula Meteorite. This card is basically Sinister Shadow Games on crack, because what this card does for you is does 3 things. First, it flips all face-down monsters on the field in face-up defense position, which triggers all of your worm flip effects. The next thing it does is, well, actually, it does 4 things. Next, it actually resets all of them during your end phase, so you can activate their effects again during your turn. And after that, you have to draw cards for each one of your monsters flipped face back face down, which is really nice. And the last thing it does for you is to bring out a Worm King, Worm Queen, or a Worm Victory straight to your field, which is really powerful. So it can be like a +4, maybe +5 even if you're lucky. But generally it's going to be a +2, +3 already right there on the card, and it's really nice. Next we run the triple offering to the Snake Deity. This card is basically Icarus attack for reptiles, but it's better than Icarus attack because it also triggers a supply squad, because it destroys your own monsters as well as 2 cards your opponent controls. So you don't tribute, you just destroy all of them at the same time, which means that supply squad will trigger, which is really cool. So you basically go even more plus than you normally would with a offering. So yeah, it's kind of awesome. Next, for the extra deck, we run 1 Worm 0. This card is a plus generator on its own. If you manage to get all 3 of its effects off, you get a +3 every turn, which is ridiculous if you manage to keep it on board, and your opponent will likely try to get rid of this thing as fast as possible. Just worthy of note, don't flip this guy face down with a Worm Nebula Meteorite or something like that, because then it will lose all of its effects when it's flipped back face up, which is kind of like a fatal flaw of the card. But at least you'll have something to tribute for the Worm King or the offering, should you need it. Next on the 1 Armades. This is a meta call, so to speak, because the Burning Abyss and Shadows are everywhere. You might as well play something like Armades in a rank 4, well, a level 4 based deck like this, just to go for this thing and then make a Armades and run over troublesome cards that you don't want their effects to go off of. Next we go for the number 1 to 7 Galaxy-sized Tachyon Dragon. Remember, we don't run that many level 8s, but we only run 4 of them, but they're so easy to get out that I can justify playing rank 8s in this deck. So Tachyon Dragon is one of the staples, along with, of course, the Heretic Sun Dragon Order of Heliopolis. Now, Tachyon Dragon is basically a Armades in Xyz form. And it is a bit stronger, so it's kind of neat in that regard. It's not as good as Armades because it doesn't stop the effects in the graveyard, but if any effects do activate, you get to attack again with 1,000 more attack, so it's really awesome. Of course, the Heliopolis is a monster that cleans the board of threatening cards, as well as it sits on a 3,000 attack point body, which is really powerful. Next we run the 1 Divine Dragonite Felgrand. Now this card is a staple among rank 8 monsters. If you can make them, you should be making this guy as before any of these two. He is just a good card because he can negate monster effects as well as making himself unaffected by other card effects, so he protects himself, which is really cool. Next we go for the Lancelot, Ghost Knight of the Underworld. This card is a nice rank 8 because he can negate the activations of spell, trap, and monster effects, as well as attack your opponent directly while it has Xyz material. And when it does attack your opponent directly, and successfully does it, you get to pop a card they control. You get to pop a face-up monster they control. So it's really, really nice. Next we run the 1K Gorgon, just to stop, well, it's basically just there to, you know, change targets of things. It's just a nice little tech card. I always like King Gorgon. It's more of a quirk of mine than anything else. You can run something else if you really want to. Next we run the King of the Feral Imps, triples of him. He is our big searcher. This is more or less our Stratos, more so than the Cardos, because he searches everything in the entire deck besides the Honest and the Glow Up Bulb, which is really awesome. And he's easy to make in the deck too, so yeah. I don't see a reason not to run him anymore in this particular deck. It's so good. Next we run the 1 Evigishki Marrowgeist. This is more for the Shadal this is more for the Burning Abyss matchup than anything else. He just shuffles cards back into the deck when he destroys them, which is really awesome. Next we go for the 1 Silent Honors Arc. This card is really good because, you know, it's out to difficult situations. Same thing with Castal. And finally, the Evil Swarm Excision Knight blows up the board in case you should have a rough time and just happen to have something like a Wormzax and a Kagato Kage on hand. And finally, we run the 1 Lovable Chain to ditch anything that we really don't want to have in our deck at the moment, as well as top decking things, so it's really cool. Next, as for siding, actually I built a side deck for this, in case you really want to play something like this. We run, of course, Flying Sea for the Burning Abyss, 2 Effect Veilers in case the breakthrough skills aren't for you. Of course, there is also the Shuttle Construct and Winda. Because this deck is light-based, you can run Super Poly along with a Construct and Winda in your extra deck. You can like replace something like, say, the Ghost Knight or something like that doesn't really work well against Shadals, and replace it with this, and basically just replace the polymerization with the Super Poly. So yeah, also we run the Raigeki for those rogue decks that this deck can have some trouble with, because they're going to be running it, and we might as well run it too. If they run it in main deck, we can run this in siding. Next we run the 1 Different Dimension Ground. This is for a counter to Shadal Fusion, as well as just the Shadals in general, just to get make sure that they don't trigger their own effects and things like that. Next we run 2 Chain Disappearances for the Burning Abyss. This deck actually has kind of trouble with the Burning Abyss because of a certain Pallades, hence why I want to keep them away from making things like Pallades. By just taking out their friggin' by just taking out the tour guide when it comes out. Next, of course, there is the damage equals reptile. Should you want to run something like this, it's better in the Venomenaga build, but it still works well here too, in case you really need it. You can run it instead of the Worm Call, but then you probably don't want to run the Worm Victory. Next, we run the 2 Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors. This is just to stop opponents from making... yeah, it's just to stop Shaddolls and Burning Abyss, basically. Luckily, it does not stop Kage-to-Kage because Kage-to-Kage triggers in hand, so his effect is not stopped by Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, so it's kind of nice. And finally, we're on the 1 Solemn Warning, Inciting, actually. This card is not actually that good in this format because everything pays for itself anyway. So it's basically just for the rogue matchups. So yeah, tell me what you guys think about this deck, and I'm out.